Hello and welcome to a very special program, our continued focus on the situation in Ukraine. I'm Vishnu broadcasting from Kyiv in Ukraine. Well, earlier today there were missile attacks on Kyiv itself, renewed attacks by the Russians which come less than 24 hours after news broke that Ukrainian forces had sunk the warship, the Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Navy's Black Sea Fleet. It is a huge military loss for Russia, one of its principal surface combatants having been destroyed. But as a result of that, in what is being seen as tit-for-tat retaliation, a major missile factory has been targeted in the Kyiv area. Earlier today, there were also air raid sirens which took place. We could hear it all. And there have also been warnings from Russia that if there are attacks by the Ukrainians on Russian targets, then they're going to fiercely retaliate. Is this the beginning of what everybody says is an inevitability? The war really picking up pace, particularly in the south and the southeast of this country, where the battle lines have literally been drawn with a massive influx of soldiers and weaponry from both sides. Today I was in the town of Irpin, a short distance away from Kyiv, where I got a first-hand look at some of the devastation on the ground. Besides anything else, we were able to get into some underground shelters, call them bunkers, where we got an idea of how Ukrainian soldiers fighting against the Russians were able to protect themselves while the structure overhead was being bombed. This dog has been lying over here for a while now. It doesn't move at all. I don't know if it's missing its owner or just lying over there. I don't know if it's okay, but it's obviously somebody's dog. What we thought we'd do is, and we found a bunker over here. It's an underground sort of place where somebody was staying when Irpin was being completely bombed. So just sort of entering this place, and as you can see, this is how people survived. There's water which was stored. There was a gas connection of some sort, a stove as well, and obviously no electricity. But somebody who cooked food over here was here. Perhaps somebody's maybe still here, just till a couple of days back. And we'll just move through this area where somebody had taken shelter to show you how people lived through this mess. There are a handful of beds over here. That's a full-fledged bunker, in fact. A lot of people would have spent their nights over here while the building above was being bombed. So, and this is actually interconnected to several other rooms. And we won't go any further, but it's interconnected. It's underneath this building, and this just gives you an idea of how people actually lived. Let's go back outside and keep showing you what else it is that we have spotted over here. There are a couple of military fatigues as well, which suggests that perhaps some of the people over here may have been soldiers. In fact, these are bulletproof jackets. So perhaps there were soldiers, or we don't know if this is Russian or it is Ukrainian. It's difficult to say, but that's a flak jacket over there. There would have been some soldiers who'd taken shelter over here. Some medicines on the ground as well. And this picture of Christ, it's an inscription of Christ. This place was living hell, have no doubt about it. This is another bulletproof jacket on the ground. All around, this place was being hammered with shells. We're going to go up and give you an idea of what is there actually outside. Because while maybe soldiers were here outside, elsewhere, again, just take a look at this building complex that's completely been destroyed. There's a pram over here. So again, we find so many things associated with children. If you come with me over here, Ashok, there's another pram over here. That's somebody's cat. This is where people led their lives. This is a perfectly normal. And you know, I found something else. And there's a stuffed animal over there, and there are flowers right next to it. It's this really unfortunate collection of what used to be the lives of people that we see over here in Irpin. It is truly unbelievable to think that just 50 odd days back this was a normal housing colony, and now it's been completely destroyed. With Ashok Mahale and Uma Shankar Singh in Irpin, Ukraine, Vishnu for NDTV. We're in the town of Irpin on the outskirts of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, on a night when there were reports that there could have been further attacks in Kyiv itself by the Russians. There isn't very much detail on that, but we are coming into these areas which have really been very badly hit. This is a cultural center in the town of Irpin, completely destroyed. And you know, we are walking gingerly across this area because it's full of glass. And I'm told that there were a lot of events for children which were actually held over here. Ashok, you want to just take a look inside? Because right in the distance, it's been completely destroyed. And we're just going to move to the other part of the building as well, and just give you an idea of what went on over here. Because on both sides of the road, which passes through here, you can see this huge destruction. That entire apartment complex. Then there are holes in this building in front of us over there. And this is machine gun fire, automatic weapon fire all across this world. There was a gun battle which took place over here. And that's actually what you can see quite clearly. All these are bullet marks. An active gun battle was fought over here. And this was destroyed. As you can see, a shell went through this, or it was attacked from the air. We'll never know, and we won't know how many people died here. If any person died here, it's quite possible, given the extent of the damages and the battle that actually took place. But Irpin is littered with buildings like this, which are now completely demolished, completely destroyed. And we need to actually be careful over here, because there are areas where there was obviously, shells which landed, or even possibly mortar rounds. And you can see this crater over here, where something obviously landed and exploded and created perhaps part of the damage. And over here, some ordnance which actually penetrated concrete and went down. So we won't get too close to that. But right over there is a hole. It goes deep down, and it's the concrete, the surface itself, which has been penetrated. And if you just turn over there and look straight, then there's another building, looks like a home, completely destroyed in this area. And this is what we keep finding all across this region, whether it's Irpin, Hostomel, Bucha, or Borodyanka, where we've been reporting from. A huge amount of damage to places. For example, this was a cultural center. It's too early to talk about the costs of rebuilding parts of Ukraine, because the war is far from over. But the damage is huge. It's significant. With Ashok Mahale and Uma Shankar Singh in Irpin, north of Kyiv, Vishnu for NDTV. The loss of the Moskva, the Russian Navy's Black Sea flagship, is one of the biggest naval losses since the 1982 Falkland Islands War between Argentina and the United Kingdom. The Moskva, which was struck by 2 Ukrainian anti-ship missiles and has since sunk, is one of the principal combatants, or was one of the principal combatants of the Russian Navy. Besides anything else, it was one of the most heavily armed warships anywhere on Earth. In fact, way back in 2003, I was on the Moskva when it was a warship which had been deployed for the Indra series of exercises with the Indian Navy. The footage that you actually see is footage from those exercises. It's a Slava class frigate, a cruiser I should say, much larger than a frigate. It's with a displacement of more than 12,000 tons, and it had a principal surface armament of 16 cruise missiles, 16 Vulcan cruise missiles designed to strike targets with heavy ordnance hundreds of kilometers away. The Moskva was also incredibly well defended. It was well defended with a tiered suite of surface-to-air missile systems. What the Ukrainians managed to do was actually penetrate those tiered defenses. First, an S-300 surface-to-air missile system installed on the warship, then a close-in weapon system designed to actually take out any missiles which were leakers, which managed to get through the defenses, and finally a close-in missile system which was actually designed with guns to take out any final missile. So 3 levels of defenses were breached by the Ukrainians and their missiles in order for the Slava class cruiser, the Moskva, to be struck. There are reports that hundreds of sailors on board may have perished. We don't have any final confirmation. There was an attempt to tow the ship back to Sevastopol in Crimea, but in heavy seas it eventually sank. A lot of individuals suggest that what we are seeing now is a lull in the situation in Ukraine before there is an extension of even more hostilities because satellite imagery seems to show that Russian forces are building up. We know that Ukrainian defenders are also getting ready for what might be a lot more in terms of the actual conflict. Joining us now, the spokesperson of the Ukrainian military. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. A quick question. What is the situation in the Donbass region? Is an attack by Russia imminent?
Коротке питання, яка зараз ситуація в Донбаському регіоні і чи наступ з боку Росії вже насувається безпосередньо?
Ситуацію, яка наразі склалася на сході України, зокрема в Донецькій і Луганській областей, ми можемо назвати складною, але цілком прогнозованою і контрольованою з боку української армії. Нам відомо, що Російська Федерація стягує туди потужні резерви живої сили, військової техніки. Нам відомо, що формування наступального ядра російської армії фактично переходить в завершальну фазу. Коли такий наступ широкомасштабний почнеться, в які саме дні, я сказати не можу точно, але ворог цілком може зненацька почати штурмові дії, не дочекаючись підходу там певних резервів або завершення формування наступальної армії.
The situation in eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, is difficult, but it's completely what we would forecast, and it's completely what we would forecast, and that's completely under control. The enemy continues to bring their reserves in terms of both personnel and military equipment to create a strong assault core, so to say, in those areas, and now the creation of that offensive core comes to its completion, and we cannot say any exact date when the enemy is to start its offensive action, but we can imagine that it may start all of a sudden even before the full completion of the development of that offensive core.
Sir, what is the significance of the loss of the ship Moskva?
Наскільки важлива втрата крейсера Москва?
Весь світ розуміє, що втрата флагмана Чорноморського флоту Російської Федерації – це величезна втрата.
The whole world understands that when the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet of Russian Federation is lost, this is a huge loss.
Це суттєве зниження бойових спроможностей армії Росії, зокрема в Чорноморському регіоні.
It significantly reduces the combat capacity of the Russian army, in particular in Black Sea region.
There have been reports of chemical weapons which have been used in Mariupol, for example. Is it your concern that the Russians might actually expand the use of weapons, which are cluster munitions, for example, or chemical weapons, for example.
Останнє питання. Ми чули повідомлення про використання росіянами хімічної зброї, зокрема в Маріуполі. Чи вас непокоїть те, що росіяни можуть розширити використання забороненої зброї, зокрема, наприклад, касетної зброї або хімічної зброї?
Ну, передусім, стосовно застосування цієї зброї у Маріуполі станом на зараз, конкретики я дати не можу, оскільки ми перевіряємо цю інформацію. У нас дуже недостатньо відомостей для того, аби підтвердити, що саме це було. Але я скажу, що це дуже схоже на фосфорні боєприпаси. Але цілком ймовірно, що це була хімічна зброя, так званий пілотний проєкт.
First of all, I would say that currently I cannot confirm or disprove the use of chemical weapons in Mariupol because we have insufficient information as of now, but tentatively based on the information we have, it looks like those might be phosphorus bombs or those might be also chemical weapons as sort of a pilot project by Russians.
І усе це на тлі того, що фактично заборонено зброю Росія в Україні вже використовувала.
And it all follows the cases where Russian Federation already used prohibited weapons in Ukraine.
Well, joining us now, Mr. Danilo Lubkivsky, the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Sir, thanks very much for joining us. Now, we've seen the attack on the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and we've seen these tit-for-tat attacks, missile attacks taking place near Kyiv. Is there a real worry that the attack on the Moskva could actually trigger something larger in Ukraine?
Good evening, sir. But before I answer your important question, let me first of all thank you and to thank your colleagues for delivering, and your TV company for delivering the truth about Ukraine, about the situation in Ukraine, about the cynical Russia's war against our country, and about sufferings and heroism of the Ukrainian people who defend today our motherland. And now turning to your question, let me say that definitely we should expect further escalation of Russia's offensive. And the evidence of that is the recent attacks that you already described in Kyiv happened tonight. There is also a warning that Russia may continue its attempts to threaten our capital. And there are a lot of other signs of Russia being prepared for further grand offensive against Ukraine. The reason for this grand offensive is very simple. Putin and his regime of war criminals, they lost in Ukraine. Their initial plan to have an easy journey to Kyiv, to all over our country, failed. So right now they look forward, they attempt a new effort, which may be, in their opinion, yet another effort or attempt to make a military breakthrough. In my opinion, they will fail again.
Right. So, for the last few days, I've been traveling through Irpin, Borodyanka, and Bucha. And, we've been speaking to ordinary people, not people, set up for a conversation with us by the Ukrainian government. And that's important because I think independently we've been able to speak to people who talk about Russian excesses. Do you believe the evidence now is overwhelming that wartime atrocities have been committed by Russian soldiers, that it's not a question of Ukrainian rhetoric, the evidence is on the ground, many people have been executed, little girls have been raped and murdered? All of this appears to be true.
Thank you for saying this, because for Ukraine it is highly important that India understands the pain of our nation. The footage, the images that you showed, and I followed very carefully what you have shown to our audience, is absolutely and unspeakably heartbreaking. I know these places. They were the most peaceful and calm places around Kyiv. I know these places when I was a child, visiting with my parents. So right now what we see and what we know from the reports we receive from the ground is that we may clearly say that these acts of horror are not only war crimes in their direct meaning, but these are acts of genocide against Ukrainians. So this unprovoked, unjust, very cynical war against Ukraine is of genocidal nature.
Right. And sir, do you therefore believe that this is something that will come up before the International Criminal Court in a very big way, that ultimately there'll be justice for those who've died, who've lost their lives, who've been mutilated, who've been tortured, and who've been executed?
In my opinion, there is no other way. As for the civilized world order to find a way to establish an international tribunal to prosecute and to bring to justice and account those who ordered, commanded and executed these horrible acts of genocide against Ukrainians, starting from President Putin and all war criminals that are part of his regime. I believe that the world will respond to these acts of horror, as the world should protect the very sense of humanity. These are the crimes against humanity.
Right. Well, sir, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening and, sharing your thoughts. It is fairly tense in Kyiv. There is a sense, an expectation almost that perhaps more attacks might take place across Ukraine, perhaps even in Kyiv. Let us hope that there is no more bloodshed. Let us hope that peace can be found for people not just in Ukraine but in Russia, and indeed for peace across Europe. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.